Well, the purpose of the Global Irish Revolution project is really to think about what happened in Ireland in terms of what's happening in the rest of the world in the same period. And I suppose we've got probably two core questions. And one is, to what extent do revolutionary developments outside Ireland and political developments outside Ireland shape what's happening in Ireland? So, for example, in terms of people's aspirations, why is it that in 1914 by and large Irish nationalists are happy enough with a kind of home rule settlement, and yet by 1918 there's a widespread demand for a republic? So part of the answer for that might be what's happening in Ireland, but a lot of the answer is what's happening in terms of the aftermath of the First World War. So it's really about thinking about the connection between events elsewhere and events happening in Ireland. And then the second kind of key question we have is considering how developments in Ireland then resonate beyond Ireland. And we can do that in a number of different kind of contexts. So one obvious context, for example, is the Irish diaspora. There's a kind of Irish world abroad, the United States most obviously, but also places like Australia and Canada and so on. And these communities are also mobilised by the Irish Revolution. So it's thinking a little bit about that kind of how wider developments in Ireland radiate outwards. Another quite important kind of context there is also the British Empire. So not just looking at the Irish diaspora in different British dominions, but also thinking about how other national kind of groups look at what's happening in Ireland and respond. So if you think about kind of international discussion of the Irish question, very often Ireland is lumped with places like India and Egypt. And I suppose one way in which we're sort of bringing together these two questions, looking at the outside world and looking at how the outside world intrudes within, is thinking about those kind of transnational connections between different nationalist groups. So quite often in places like Paris, for example, in terms of what's going on in the Versailles Conference, or in places like New York in 1920, 1921, you'll find different nationalist and anti-imperialist groups working together along with other groups, such as even for example, movements for self-determination, black rights movements and so on. So it's kind of trying to get a sense of how people at that time understood the world, rather than just thinking a little bit about what's happening in terms of the national context. And one way to do that is to think about these transnational connections.
The Irish Revolution is a fundamental event in Irish history, but it's also a fundamental event in global history. And when we think of a global approach to the Irish Revolution, what we're essentially doing is conceptualizing this pivotal moment in Irish history within a wider contextual framework. There are revolutions across the world, many of course in the 20th century, which have parallels with Ireland. But Ireland is unique in the sense that because of its diasporic and migratory population, the revolution is able to draw on this resource in order to enable it to achieve its objectives. So the two elements I think that clearly are brought by a diasporic and transnational approach are comparative, what's going on in other places, what are other people doing, and the second element is bringing the diaspora back into the centre of events that were unfolding in modern Ireland itself.